That wasn't the noise I was going for. Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in. Behind me is a 2017 Hyundai Sonata with a crazy chain rattle. Listen to this thing. Now I didn't want to run it too long, but just enough. You can hear that crazy noise. That's the timing chain. This thing only has 88,000 miles on it. 2017, it's nuts that it already needs a new timing kit. And out. It's a little wiggle and finesse. Wiggle and finesse. Okay, perfect. You can see this chain is just ridiculous. All right, we are just about finished. So what we want to do, put the tire on, lower it, and then we can start it up. Are you nervous? I'm a little nervous. That wasn't the noise I was going for. Oh man, did we misdiagnose it? You saw when I pulled the valve cover off how loose that chain was. Super rattly chain. So what else could cause a loose chain other than a timing chain tensioner? Let's go ahead, pull the valve cover back off. We want to check the cam phasers. Now these were checked during the initial diagnosis, but maybe we missed something. So let's pull the valve cover off. We'll look at those phasers because those phasers are able to move with oil pressure. So maybe it's not locking back in its rest position and it's just rattling like that. So back to work. Okay, so this is how you check the phasers. So the phasers are controlled by oil. And if there's no oil pressure, there's a lock pin that locks it in place so it can't move. It's locked in with the cam. Oil pressure removes that lock pin and allows it to turn depending on how much pressure is applied. It can turn. Once oil pressure is released, the lock pin locks it in and now we're locked. That is the same for both of them. So if something is wrong with the lock pin or if it's not locking and it's just allowed to rattle on there, I should be able to move the cam independently of the sprocket. So I will hold one so the cam's not moving. As soon as the chain tightens up, the cam won't turn anymore. And if I go the other way, the chain tightens up on this side and the cam won't move. So it's locked. So let's do the other one. So same, it's tight over here. The cam won't move, it's locked in. And then we'll do the other way, pushing it in that direction and it won't. So that slack right there is all because the timing chain tensioner is not tensioning. Brand new tensioner, I wouldn't imagine it would be bad from the box. So that movement, the cam is moving. The tensioner should be putting tension and not allowing that to happen. And those tensioners are a ratcheting mechanism. So once the pin is pulled and it ratchets forward, it should not be able to be pushed back in, maybe a little, but definitely not that much. Another thing that could cause issues with the tensioner is not enough oil pressure to pump up that tensioner. Okay, so the oil pressure is supposed to be a minimum of 11.5 PSI at 1,000 RPM. So they kind of give you like a minimum spec. So I'm gonna start the vehicle up, try to get it to 1,000. Kind of don't like to have it that high of RPM with the noise that it's making, but we need an oil pressure reading. Okay, let's review the footage, see what we got. Okay, so we have oil pressure. Our phasers are locked to the cams, so the only thing left that it leaves is our timing chain tensioner. So we're gonna pull this whole thing apart one more time, and we'll fire it up. Hopefully that'll be third time the charm. Okay, so before tearing this all back apart, what I decided to do is just check the variable valve timing solenoids. So I took out the intake, took out the exhaust, because I was thinking, well, what if they're open just a smidge, like one of them, like the intake was open just a smidge, just enough to allow a little bit of oil pressure in to unlock the cam phaser. Then maybe it could cause a little movement of the phaser while it's running, but then when it's not running, it just relocks itself. So if there was just a little bleed through, maybe that could cause something. So I pulled it out. Let me show you what I found, and I think this kind of ends our adventure. So here are the solenoids. Now the exhaust is a little harder to see, but on the intake, but it is just caked in metal shards. When I was looking at the old tensioner here, and you can move it, I was finding metal fragments, metal shards. I was thinking, well, that was internal from the tensioner, but now that I'm finding metal in both of the oil control valve filters, I'm thinking, well, maybe that metal's coming from somewhere else actually, and we have a deeper engine issue, not just the tensioner. So I still think the rattle you hear is because the tensioner isn't tensioning, but these tensioners, they're a ratchet system inside, but they also run off of oil pressure. And I'm suspecting that oil port on the engine side is clogged with metal debris possibly, and the oil isn't flowing through. Even though we have oil pressure from our oil pressure sender, that port there that I'm tied into, doesn't necessarily mean that we have oil pressure in every single port of the engine. And I'm wondering if that port is clogged, not allowing oil to pump up the tensioner. So having metal in the tensioner, having metal in the VVT solenoids leads me to believe that this engine is failing internally. It's aluminum shaving, so it could be bearing material. Not quite sure where it's coming from, but we definitely should not have metal flowing throughout the engine. So putting on a new tensioner is not the right move, so we're gonna just not do that. The customer has only had this vehicle for less than a year, so they're gonna contact where they bought it from, see what they can do, but it's possible that this just needs a new engine, which is unfortunate. So for us, the diagnosis seemed pretty straightforward. Loose chain, you can see the tensioner moving. It should not be moving, so it needs a tensioner. But under further deep diving into it, we find that yes, the tensioner was bad, but why? It wasn't just a tensioner failure. So this wasn't as cut and dry as it seemed to be. We'll see what the customer finds out from where they bought it from and go from there. Well, thanks for watching. Like, subscribe. See you on the next one.